Welcome to Taking the Myth, your topical, skeptical discussion show. I'm Stephen Knight, and joining me is the amazing Iram Ramzan. Iram, how you doing?
Wow, you actually said my name this time.
I'm in a good mood today. I'm full of serotonin and dopamines. I've just got back from a run, so it's my heart rate's still through the roof, but feeling good.
Oh, does that mean you've lost a bit of your lockdown weight? Because you're a bit chunky last time, weren't you?
I was, a little tubby funster. Down a whole 6 pounds, Iram. 6 pounds.
That is good. Yeah. That is good. How are you feeling?
I'm almost human shaped, which is fun.
You're not a round ball.
Not really. This is kind of par for the course for me. I'm a bit of a yo-yoer anyway. I just like food, so there's that. It's not a mystery. I'm not kind of like waking up and going, oh, why don't my jeans fit anymore? I sort of know the path of progression and the relationship between mystery, no. Calories and chunk. But I am cheap, so I am the kind of person who will refuse to buy new fitting clothes. So the easiest solution is just to drop a few pounds so I can get back into the old 32 waist jeans, essentially. How are you?
Well, I'm not fat. I actually have lost a little bit of weight. I've just got a real weird relationship with weight, you know. I mean, I'm just never happy. Like sometimes I feel if I've lost weight, you know, everyone always says to me, oh, you've just lost too much weight, you look really skinny. And then when I gain weight, God, your face has gone fat. So I'm like, I can't win with people.
I
I went home and, you know, everyone kept saying to me, oh, you need to eat. I was like, I do eat, okay, you need to eat, you look skinny. I mean, your face normally looks fat, but now you look skinny.
That's like a South Asian family stereotype of the feeding mother. Is that true? Does that ring true? She just kind of chasing you around the house?
Yes, it is absolutely true.
Right.
It is true. I mean, they'll call you fat 1 minute and then they'll fill your plate up with seconds. So you're like, okay, so you're the reason why I'm fat, basically.
Anyway, we've got a million things to talk about. We appear to be right in the midst of a full-scale gender war at the minute. There are so many stories in the news that relate to the collision between gender ideology and free expression, and the main victims of this war, or the collateral damage rather, appear to be women. Oh, should I say rather cisgendered biological women. So I don't know if you've been paying attention to this. We've got a million stories. There's a woman charged in Scotland for alleged transphobic tweets. Mayor Forstater won her appeal in court. She was fired for transphobic tweets, I think, or something like that. I think she was of the opinion that, you know, you can't change your sex. There's a lady called Lisa Keogh who was a student. She was in trouble with her university for saying women have vaginas, apparently, and she was cleared for that. Who else?
That's news to me.
Yeah. What, that story or that women have vaginas?
The women have vaginas, I think.
I've heard. I've had it on good authority.
I probably just need to have another look down there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
My studies are rather slim. However, there's another story as well. The Royal Academy's apologised to artist Jester Walls. She'd said in a blog that humans can't change their sex, so the Royal Academy completely removed all this artist's work from their gift shop, publicly condemned her as a transphobe, but they've, after public pressure, done a U-turn. So I'm looking forward to getting into all of that.
And we'll be really cancelled and truly after this now.
I've stopped. You know what? I've been through this because I used to sort of tiptoe around fundamentalist Islam and sort of try and do my very... I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with speaking in really clear terms and saying exactly what is true and why it's true. But obviously you've got to think politically as well. You've got to think, how is this going to be perceived? Am I leaving myself open to misinterpretation or attacks or bad faith actors? And over the years, I've sort of realised that it doesn't matter how crystal clear you are in your approach, how you may champion it through a sort of progressive human rights based prism, people will always attack you. They've already decided that they will destroy you, or they will never agree with any alternative position whatsoever. So I think fuck that now, and I think we should speak in very clear, plain language about the issues. And that doesn't mean we have to be arseholes to people or not be empathetic or be considerate or respectful human beings, but fuck me, there's a difference between a biological man and a biological woman, and I think most 5-year-olds could probably tell you that. But before we jump into this gender war, and I basically shut up and just let you take all the heat for it, Sajid Javid, some progression in the area of underage marriages or under 18-year-old marriages in the UK. Apparently there's some concern or reasons to believe that a lot of these under 18-year-old marriages are sort of coerced for religious or cultural reasons, and Sajid Javid, a Conservative MP, is trying to end that. What do you know?
So I did a campaign. I launched a campaign about 2 years ago. It was the Girls Not Bride initiative, and all these various charities, women's charities and honour-based charities. They were very concerned that the UK law, which allows 16 to 18-year-olds to marry with parental permission, was often meaning that it was parental coercion that was allowing children to get married. If you get a 16-year-old who wants to get married and their parents say it's okay, no one would really raise alarms because, their parents have said it's absolutely fine. But a lot of these groups were saying that actually, these children, they're not exactly going to be love-struck teens. They're going to be young girls, and it often is young girls. If you look at the stats, you will see overwhelmingly more 16 and 17-year-old girls getting married compared to 16 and 17-year-old boys. They were saying that although the figures are dropping officially, it's still an area of concern, and the figures also don't include people who get married abroad or people.
That's sort of off the books, isn't it?
Yeah. So if men marry here and marry girls from abroad who are 16 or 17, doesn't really appear in the stats. It's an outdated law, basically. It dates back to the Second World War when, people would have left school quite early. Now you have to stay in education or training until you're 18. Back then it was from 14 to then I think 16, and now it's been raised to 18. So 16 was seen as a decent enough age, because hardly anybody then would still be in school, and if your parents said it was okay, then you could. But as I said before, these children are getting married at that age. They're not love's young dream. They're getting married for cultural or religious reasons, and I've seen it myself when I was growing up. When I went to school, there's some girls that were in my year or maybe the year above who, as soon as they left school, they would just be told that they were marrying a cousin from Pakistan, and the reason was so that this man could come here, work, and send money to his family back there. There's nothing romantic about it. It was more like a bloody business transaction more than anything. And these girls, they were deprived of proper education. They weren't given the chance to really experience true childhood and adolescence, that chance to sort of just develop and learn who you are before settling down, and then they'd just be having kids quite young as well. And I've seen one or two of them actually, whenever I've gone back home, and the same age as me, but they just look so old because they've had a very difficult life. And like I said, it is usually girls who are disproportionately affected. These young girls who are grown up with the expectation of entering into this lifelong commitment with usually an older man. But anyway, I think let's stop beating around the bush. I think this is child abuse, because nobody's gonna pressure the 16-year-old into getting married for good reasons. They're not doing it because it's for their own good. They're doing it because of their family honour and all that crap. Some of these young women or girls in this instance, they're going to be married off to an older man, probably to settle debts or strengthen family links, you know, as though it's their responsibility to do that. And, you know, around the world, you know, girls who get married, they'll often have complications during pregnancy and childbirth because their bodies aren't fully developed. So they're having children and, you know, they're going through all this pain because of that. And they're going to be at more risk of domestic, sexual and honour-based violence. And it usually is young girls because they're easier to control. Why can't these fucking grown-ass men marry women their own age? Because they want someone they can control. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about the existence of a patriarchy, there you have it. And obviously, Western, quote-unquote, Western white feminists are very quiet on this issue, unfortunately. But it is just a way of men taking power over women, putting them on the sort of cattle life cycle of reproduction, making them subservient in the household, you know, get them as young as 16. And it's a bit of an odd thing. I mean, for many of our American listeners might not be aware that the age of sexual consent in the UK is 16. Now that, for me, when I was closer to that age, felt about right. It felt like we'd got a good balance. I think it's slightly younger in various places in Europe, but
in France, I think in America as well, there's no standard age of consent really.
Is that right?
There?
I thought it was like 18.
I think for marriage anyway, it varies from state.
Right.
So you can get some states where you can probably get married as young as maybe 14, I think. Whereas in the UK, it's 18 without parental consent and 16 with.
What about Gretna Green?
Consent.
That's the question. Is that still a thing?
It is. And in Scotland, you know, you can get married at 16. I don't think you need parental consent even then. But, you know, this, like I said before, you know, this idea of young 16-year-olds running off to Gretna Green because they're in love, it's just a myth now. I don't think anyone really does that. Yeah, so when I was speaking to campaigners a couple of years ago, they were saying that social workers had noticed in schools that Romanian girls and boys were saying they were married, and they were thinking, hang on, what do you mean you're married? And apparently these children who were sent back to their home countries, or maybe they do it here as well underground, and they were sent abroad to get married, and because they're both the same age, it wasn't raising alarm bells. And the social workers were saying to the charities, they're saying it's part of their culture. I mean, do you think that's okay? And you're like, no. They're 14 and they're saying they're married and they're going to get pregnant. And then yeah, they would be disproportionately featured in teen pregnancy rates as well. I mean, yeah, I get it. People have their own values, their own culture, and, you know, we can celebrate certain bits of that. But when that is in conflict with the culture and the established traditions that we have in this country and the law of the land, then why is it that people are still too scared to point that out?
We're seeing the collision of that ignorance and that complete avoidance of the issue in Batley right now, I think, where...
Yes.
I'd say overwhelmingly, culturally, maybe we're fairly liberal in the UK now. I mean, not in the sense that everyone's on board with everything and they're all for it, but in the sense that we're like, fine, if it makes you happy, we're okay, you know. And I'll do my thing, you do your thing. So, for instance, I'm sure there are many people who probably don't care for the idea of gay marriage in the UK, but are like, fine, I'm not against it. It's not my thing. I don't really agree with it, but if you want to get married, you get married. That to me is a liberal mentality, regardless. There's a difference between being for something and being a liberal in the face of something, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that'll affect me, but, you know, if it's something that you want to do, if you want to get married and you're a gay couple, whatever.
The questions are, yeah, gay marriage, do I have to do it? No. Are you going to force other people to do it? No. Fine. Fill your boots, mate. If you want to be just as unhappy as everyone else that's married, go for it. But the point I'm making is, so what we've got here, we're happy to enforce these liberal standards, and progressives go for anyone that transgresses them to the smallest amount. You know, if you don't say, for instance, that trans women are women, people will hound you. If you say anything alternative to that or slightly off that, look at J.K. Rowling, anything that doesn't swing to the sort of progressive orthodoxy, people and society will go for you, call it out, criticize. That's both good and bad. I do think bad ideas should be criticized. It can go too far.
Yeah,
however,
I agree. If you're an angry Muslim man shouting outside Batley and you're saying, I don't think our religion believes in this, but it doesn't allow for this.
Yeah.
Why do I sound like William Hague? Then then you could get away with it, and
That's
everyone will
point.
say, "Oh well, it's their culture, it's their religion. Let's not be racist here. The far right are going to come and they're going to just jump on this. Oh, just think of the far right."
So it's like, so these liberal freedoms and progressive ideologies are so important. They must be enforced at every turn and fought for, and we must have activists, and we must have endless think tanks and organisations and pressure groups, except when the person saying things that are the antithesis to those progressive ideals are from the Muslim community. There's this horrible, horrible thing we've done now in terms of multiculturalism, where we've separated out standards based on skin, which is racist. Like, I get called racist for being critical of Islam because I expect the same from everyone that I demand of myself, right? And that, to me, is the least racist attitude. What's racist is saying, actually, we can't expect you not to want to murder gays because you're a Muslim and that's your culture. This cultural relativism, and it's a cowardice as well. I think that's what frustrates me almost the most, is that these people think they're brave freedom fighters shouting at people and screaming people down for opinions that are just usually 9 times out of 10 standard vanilla opinions, but obviously they're not saying the correct words in the right order. They'll go mental, destroy someone's life and career, the merest of comments. However, you have full-throated anti-Semites, full-throated homophobes, congregating and shouting outside schools, in the streets, and silence. So, I don't know if anybody saw this, but we had the Labour candidate for Batley, who seems like a bit of a simpleton, I'll have to say. She was Joe Cox's sister. Joe Cox was a politician.
Yeah, so this is Kim Ledbetter. Yeah.
Right. Joe Cox was a Labour politician, disgustingly murdered in the UK by a sort of far-right extremist. He's in prison now, thankfully.
Yeah, that was in 2016, and it's been 5 years now.
Yeah,
and gosh, time flies.
But also,
yeah, so 5 years ago, her sister was murdered.
Yeah, and it sort of instigated a public discussion about the safety of politicians in this country. What is and isn't acceptable. In the ways in which to confront them in the streets. What's too aggressive? What's dangerous? What sort of rhetoric leads to endangerment of politicians, which I think is a fair discussion to have. I don't like to see people hounded, shouted at in the streets, or constant, mobs of hate whipped up on social media around people. I do think this kind of thing has a consequence. But not so. We had that in one hand, and every time a little bit of colourful language was used in the House of Commons, Labour had used that as a stick to beat the opposition with. So, for instance, a Tory politician would say something negative or mean or insult a Labour politicians, and Labour politicians had invoked the death of Joe Cox to say, "Do you understand that you're putting us in danger by speaking about us in this way?" They'd use it as a stick to beat people with, which was really off colour for me. So long story short, now we've got, grown men aggressively hounding female politicians in Batley because they are for LGBT rights. That's it. That's the contention. These Muslim lunatics are unhappy that their Labour candidates are pro-LGBT rights. They view it as sort of LGBT indoctrination is the terms they use. But there's a video online of some Muslim lunatic who I don't even think's from Batley. He's from Birmingham.
No, he's from Birmingham.
Right.
He's called Shakil Afsar, and I know of him very well. So do you remember when in 2019 those two schools in Birmingham were teaching lessons about inclusivity, and they said, some families have 2 mummies and 2 daddies. That's it. They weren't converting people into gays and stuff, right? But, that wasn't good enough for the likes of Shakil Afsar, who, by the way, isn't even a parent, doesn't have any children at those schools in Birmingham, but, brought it upon himself to start shouting down a megaphone outside these primary schools where kids are. These are primary school battles where you're going to have young kids going in and out who were scared, quite frankly, by a bunch of grown men shouting at the school. Well done, by the way, for standing up for children's rights, absolutely ludicrous. Anyway, so there he is, mouthing off. And he doesn't need a megaphone because he's just got a big gob anyway. And he's got a really bad haircut. And he's got a pierced ear, which actually looks quite gay. So
Yay!
He's compensating for something. I don't know. Anyway, Ram. Anyway, so this Shaquille guy is now turned up in Batley and he's shouting at Kim Leadbeater, Joe Cox's sister. Yeah, so he's turned up and starts shouting at Kim and talking about Kashmir for some odd reason. It's such an Asian thing. Every time they talk about injustice, they have to talk about, what about Kashmir? Yeah, what about the people of Kashmir? Why aren't you saying anything about them?
That was better than your William Hague, I have to say.
I don't know. I think they're on a par. And yeah, so she said, Muslim people of Batley deserve better than you. And you're not even from here. You don't even go here.
You haven't even got kids. Fuck off with your ear piercing.
Yeah, fuck off with your dodgy haircut. And he just started shouting at her. And, I think Roshan Saleh from 5 Pillars was also there as well, filming it all. I don't know if he instigated it. I mean, he definitely is on the side of these lunatics. And he just started talking about LGBT lessons. She's got nothing to do with that. She's just running as a candidate in the by-election. And you're just talking about Kashmir and you're talking about LGBT rights and school lessons. This is an instant. We saw this happen in Birmingham and we saw it happen again in Batley with that cartoon route. It's people from outside who are stirring up a lot of shit in the local community and whipping up a mob. And most of the parents of, in the area and at the school actually weren't even that outraged. I mean, they might have said, it is offensive to us. We would have liked to at least have a discussion about this, which is fair enough. I get that. Let's have a discussion about it. But why are you turning up outside a school shouting the odds and scaring children? What's that going to achieve?
Yeah, and I think the issue we've got here with Labour and how they've made themselves completely unelectable for people like me is that they're supposed to be the liberal left party, the party that will defend freedom of expression, human rights. They're supposed to be they're supposed to be lefty socialists who have no time for theocracy, have no time for blasphemies. They want individual rights, and what they'll do is whenever there is a sort of implosion in a quote-unquote community somewhere over cartoons or LGBT lessons or teachers who are teaching the wrong thing about Islam, that Labour candidates, people you hope would step up and defend liberal principles, go very quiet because they're very scared of losing the Muslim vote. They have helped this situation get to where it is now, and now it's biting them on the arse. That they've been blindsided by it. They can't possibly understand that they fed this liberalism for so long, and now it's come for them. Whereas they should just stood up straight against it, and that would have been far more popular to the general public than waiting and letting it bubble over to the point where you've got lunatics shouting at politicians in the street. And I mean, this anti-LGBT thing in Batley, the comments have been made long before this confrontation. It's been bubbling, and Labour ignored it then. I was incredibly critical of Jeremy Corbyn. I thought he was appalling. There's no way he could ever lead the party. Weak on all fronts, right? And then Keir Starmer came in, and I was initially impressed with Keir in the sense that he was better in Parliament. He'd hold Boris Johnson to account more. Boris Johnson seems to get really flustered now when arguing with Keir, which I like to see. He's being held to account.
I don't know if he does as much. I think Keir Starmer misses a lot of open goals, but
not
anyway, that's another discussion.
But it turns out that Keir Starmer seems to be doing a worse job in terms of party popularity than Corbyn was doing, which didn't seem possible to me. And he seems to have just, all the things that you thought he might take a stronger stance on, he's not. Sort of like the woke politics, he was kneeling for BLM, etc. The anti-Semitism, he's been a bit weak on that, letting people back in the party that shouldn't be back in the party. Can you envision a time when we have a powerful opposition anymore. I just can't see it.
We have no bloody opposition right now. We've seen so many restrictions during this pandemic on our civil liberties. And, there is an argument about what should have been done when there was a big health crisis going on, whether it was justified or not. But the point is, throughout the past, 15 months or so, we've not had any opposition from the other parties on the laws and the guidance that are being brought in. The government will decide something, and then about 2-3 days later, they'll have a vote and they'll just shoo in all these restrictions, and there's no debate, and the only opposition is actually coming from the government's own backbenchers. So what the hell is going on? It's not good for democracy when you don't have a strong opposition. It's better for democracy when you do have parties that are scrutinizing the government and challenging their views and what they're doing, and we've just not had any of that at all.
Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, and the shit that the Tories are able to get away with because of this. Yeah,
they're getting away with so much. And what I think is also ironic, because you were talking about how Labour is supposed to be this socialist party, stands up for the working class man, everything like that. And they should be naturally opposed to religious fundos. Socialism and communism don't really mix with religion. And actually, if you think about it, the Conservative Party should be, the natural home of also conservative brown people, because they are going to be socially conservative. And you have the opposite. And obviously, there's a historical reason for that. The Tories have a bad track record and a reputation when it comes to immigration.
Yeah.
So, that's why Labour was seen as the party of choice for a lot of Muslims, I guess.
I'm not tribal with it, so I have in my...
But people were tribal with it. That's the whole point. If you were working class, if you lived in the north, you knew you voted for Labour. And if you were, well off, you'd vote Conservative. But now, it's not really clear who people will vote for. And I'm not saying it's not a bad thing to challenge these tribal identities. You don't want to get too tribal, because then things become stale. But the problem is, there's not much difference between any of them. I don't really know what they stand for. And I think you probably feel the same way as well. Which party would you say aligns with your views?
It's a hodgepodge, because... So, in my... lifetime, I've mostly voted for Labour. I've voted for Tories once. I've voted for the Lib Dems. And for me, like you say, it's like who represents your views the most. And it can come down to that. You can have a pet political project. However, for me, of late, knowing that first we had Brexit, and then, it was kind of like, who can get this job done? I feel like I'm constantly lending my vote. I'm not... People are saying to you, well, you're a Tory. No, I'm not. I voted for the Tories at the last election, and I'm happy to criticise them and say where they're getting things wrong, and I might not vote for them at the next election. I can't remember who said it, but somebody said you should change your politicians as often as you change a nappy, and for the same reason. And I think...
Well, you change a nappy like every 2-3 hours, so yeah. I'm not sure that analogy works.
I think it's more a play on the idea of politicians being full of shit, but I've not got any tribal allegiance to any political party because I'm working class, and it is very difficult to find... I have some very pet projects or pet political things that I care about, but they're not represented by certain political parties. So it's a case of, do I go to the one fringe political party that represents this one fringe issue that I have that is useless on everything else, or do I go for the one party that's great on most things but doesn't care about this one thing? And people aren't an all or nothing collection of ideas and feelings. People will vote for political parties for very different reasons. The Tories are just more serious people than the Labour Party. Every time...
Are they? Are they?
I don't...
they've got... Boris Johnson is going on about bloody climate change and being net zero by 2050 and replacing all our gas boilers within 10 years or something, which is going to be so fucking expensive. This is the man who mocked wind turbines once and said they couldn't blow off the skin off a rice pudding or something, and now he's bringing in all these stupid laws that are just impractical. And we don't really have the technology for, say, hydrogen boilers or electric cars, because they are really expensive as well. I mean, I might as well have voted for the bloody Green Party, for all the good it's done voting Conservative. I didn't vote in the last election, by the way.
Well, I mean, maybe I have to...
So I don't have a right to view now about it, but yeah.
Maybe I should walk that comment back about the more serious people in regards to Boris Johnson. I take that point for sure. But I think as a collection of people, I think they're people, and I don't expect them to care about my pet projects or the working class. But I think as a whole, they'll do what needs to be done in the context of what's best for the country and best for civil liberties, pandemic aside, of course. Whereas I do not have any faith in Labour to be able to organise a piss up in a brewery. And they care about all the wrong things, all these esoteric concerns that they really lean into that the most of the public don't care about. Here's how I feel. The Labour Party feels more like a collection of student activists to me than serious politicians.
It's like NUS politics, isn't it?
So however you feel about the Tories and their competency on various issues, I don't think they're like student activists. I think they will get things done. Shall we blindly wade into the gender wars?
Oh my God. So we've gone from solving the crisis between Labour and the Conservatives.
It's just there've been so many stories this month relevant to this thing, and I think we've mentioned it before in terms of how, like, for instance, transgender rights should be guaranteed. I've never had any thought to the contrary. It just seems like a no-brainer that they should be guaranteed. Now, there's a lot of discussion around that, for sure, but this one issue which seems to affect a tiny minority of people has become the raison d'etre of the left for some reason. It just seems like everything is filtered through trans rights now. We have to apply trans rights to everything. It has to be at the top of the agenda for our politicians. It's, corporations are falling over themselves to offer support to trans rights. And it wouldn't be so bad, really, because, fine if that's what you want to do. But it's the way that people are being absolutely destroyed for having the wrong opinion about it. Now, I don't know how you feel, but there's a story. I mean, the first story I'm going to touch on, because it seems like a fairly simple one. This is from the Metro, and the headline is, "Student cleared of misconduct after saying women have vaginas," right? So, a mature student subject to complaints after saying women have vaginas and are physically weaker than men has been cleared of wrongdoing by her university. Now, I'm not entirely sure she used the words women are physically weaker. I think she said men are stronger. I think she actually said that men are stronger than women on average, or something like that. I don't think she called women weak at any point. I mean, women aren't weak. That's a silly thing to say. If I've got $1 billion and you've got $500 million, are you poorer than me? That doesn't make any sense, does it? We're both rich. So the idea, but still, so she's saying that men on average are physically stronger than women now, and women have vaginas. Now, these things 5 minutes ago were not controversial statements, and now they are grounds for disciplinary action. They are grounds for being fired. They are grounds for an online mob attacking you. They are grounds for corporations that you're associated with disavowing you. Where do you stand on the whole women having vaginas debate, Iram?
I'm yet to discover if I have one, so the jury is still out there. I mean, for fuck's sake, this is just... I don't know about you, but I feel like
a woman.
Gaslighted. I feel like a woman. Do I feel like a woman, or am I a woman? That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's not just about what you are biologically, it's about how you feel, how you identify. I don't know about you, but I feel in this debate about men and women and this, these gender wars, that I'm being gaslighted. And this whole thing has a very Emperor's New Clothes vibe about it. We know what's true. We know what the facts are.
Emperor has a massive lady dick, I think, is the updated version.
Exactly. And then we're told, but, this trans man is a woman and you have to accept that. And everyone's applauding and saying, yay, diversity, inclusivity. And privately thinking, this is bollocks. So basically, I got really incensed about this lately. I mean, I usually do this debate, but lately it's because of Laurel Hubbard, this 43-year-old trans woman who's been allowed to compete at the Olympics this summer for New Zealand. It had to be New Zealand as well, didn't it? In the female weightlifting team. And that has just stirred up another debate. And the Moral Maze had a discussion about this, and they had they didn't have a well, it depends what you mean by blokes, Stephen. They had 2 men, and they also had 2 trans women. Not a single woman was invited to be a witness on the show.
I'm pretty sure you mean cis, heteronormative, biological birthing person.
Fuck off. Women, okay? Women are women, men are men. I don't give a shit if I'm cancelled for this. We know it's a fact, okay? And then you had this a trans woman who's saying, but there isn't really any advantage, because even in the sports within themselves, some people will naturally have more of an advantage anyway, so blah blah blah. And then she said, well, but trans women aren't men, and the panel, one of the panel members just said, well, okay, but anyway. And I thought, no, why are you allowing that comment to slip by? It is.
It's coercion.
And this is coercion, and it's a fear of getting cancelled and being called a bigot. Now, I'm sorry, but, there are biological differences between men and women. Men are physically stronger, and it's not just the testosterone levels. And they're saying Laurel Hubbard's testosterone were below a certain point, so she can compete as a woman in the women's category. But that doesn't take away the fact that Laurel Hubbard grew up, was born a male, grew up as a man, and transitioned when, I think, in her 20s or something.
30s,
so
mid-30s.
There you go.
All
so
the benefits of
mid-30s.
puberty, male puberty, are still there. Bone density, hip to waist ratio, height, grip strength. And even though the testosterone has been reduced significantly, it's still higher than the average woman.
But it's not just about testosterone.
No.
It is, like you said, it's all the physical advantages you have as a man.
Look at it this way.
Now,
I mean, sorry, I'll use the correct pronoun, obviously, and we'll get onto this in a minute about empathy and, what's just manners. So I'll refer to them as she for the purpose of this story. But when they were identifying as male, their biological sex, he was very unremarkable in the sport of weightlifting. Couldn't even qualify, if I remember correctly. Now he's identifying as a woman, cleaning up, breaking records. Is there a link, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, do you see trans men competing against men? Now, I think there was a story. I think, was it in Canada, of a trans man competing in the male category, but didn't finish first or anything. Maybe finished 12th or something like that. But the point is, as a woman, you're not going to have that advantage over a man in sports. Whereas as a man, you are always going to have a biological advantage over a woman. And that's why. So, for example, in the US Army, when they're recruiting men and women, you'll have to complete certain tasks within a certain time. So if you're a man aged 22 to 26, you have to do a minimum of 31 push-ups, 43 sit-ups, and then a 2-mile run in 17 minutes and 30 seconds or less. Now, for women, that is, 11 push-ups. So not even 31, 11 push-ups, 43 sit-ups, and a 2-mile run in 20 minutes and 36 seconds or less. So we know biology matters. And if we got rid of the categories and said, right, you have to do it in, say, this time, so do it in 19 minutes, for example, no woman would really qualify. You might get one. I don't know. But the chances of a woman qualifying in the army would just not happen. That would be very, very slim to rare. And that's why you have these different categories. It's to allow women the chance to compete, because historically women, they were pushed out and not allowed to compete in sports. And that's why you have different categories for men and women, because if you just say, well, biology doesn't matter, let's just have men and women competing against each other, so why even have different weight categories in boxing, and just say, let's let it's a free-for-all, everybody knock each other out. Let's not even have difference between adult and kid sports. Let's just get rid of that as well, if biology and age doesn't matter. And also, do you know what I want to see now? If biology doesn't matter, let's see a trans woman boxing against a woman, and let's see if that stirs up the same kind of feelings.
We've had a few examples of that, actually. But I mean, there's a couple of things. So I mean, we've got the data on this. The Olympics show time after time, that the highest records for men, the gulf of difference between that and women. I think something like, hundreds of high school kids a year beat the women's fastest 100 meter or something like that. And this is not about shitting on women's sports. These women who are athletes are exceptional athletes. It's not about male pride either. So if I was in a ring with a female MMA fighter, she'd fold me like a deck chair, right? That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is if she's in a ring with a male MMA fighter, she's going to get leathered. Well,
if biology doesn't matter, why don't we let her compete against a male MMA fighter?
This is what it's going to take, because it's interesting, because I don't know if you saw the report that came out of UK rugby, and they really tried their hardest to try and find a way they did a great job, to be fair to them. They tried to find a way in which they could sign off on the idea of biological men who identify as women now playing rugby with the women. And vice versa. And they really looked into it. They looked at all the areas, the difference in testosterone and body strength, blah, 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 blah. And they just couldn't do it in the end. They came down on the right decision, and they advised that they don't recommend that this be allowed. I think a lot of the rugby bodies said, well, we're going to ignore that advice anyway, which is very interesting, because if they then do allow a biological male to compete against women, and he inevitably injures one of them really badly, they're probably liable for legal action because they've ignored expert advice. So
that's what it's going to come down to, isn't it?
It's going to take a woman's skull getting crushed by a biological male before people say, actually, it's probably a good idea to separate the biological sexes out. And the thing is with sport, especially sport at that level, people are talking about as if it's a human right. Most people don't have the right to compete in sports. Most of us don't. It's a very small...
No, I would not qualify for any Olympic game. Let me just put that out there.
Yeah, not a chance.
I don't think... I mean, I can understand why it must be frustrating if you're, a trans athlete and you really want to compete. Which category do you go into? But I'm sorry, you should... for the time being, you should be made to compete in the biological sex you were born into. So if you're a trans woman, you compete as a man.
Yeah.
You should not be able to compete as a woman. Some people have suggested that maybe there should be a separate trans category, but the problem with even that is there's still going to be,
probably not enough trans people to make up a...
There's not enough trans people, first of all. And then also, there's still going to be, variations even between those people. And also, the problem is that trans men and trans women want to be recognised as the gender they identify with. So they don't want to compete in the category of the sex they were born as. They want to compete with the gender they identify as. And I'm sorry, but as much as you want to do that, I don't think that should be allowed to happen. It is unfair. It is absolutely unfair. Laurel Hubbard took another woman's space. I can't remember where she was from, this woman. But, because of Laurel Hubbard, another woman has missed out on the chance to compete in the Olympics. I hope Laurel Hubbard gets gold, and then everyone can sit back and think, geez, what the fuck?
You know what the worst thing about
this?
I mean, that'd be the best outcome, really, just as a lesson on the world stage, right?
But actually, no, it hasn't been a lesson because Laurel Hubbard has won medals as a woman, and still nobody said anything.
Yeah, but this is Tokyo. This is the big. I mean, I think she's won like in New Zealand competitions. I'll have to check, but this is the world stage. The entire eyes of the world's watching Tokyo. But the problem is now is that he is getting a bit long in the tooth anyway. Maybe a very young female power athlete might do. I mean, you look at some of the lifting that the female Chinese team is doing is probably higher than what he's capable of now, because the gulf of age is so big that might make the difference. Now, that might be used as people to say, see, trans women can compete and not clean up and not really taking into account it's probably the age that makes a difference there. But I mean, I think it's important to say as well, like, just understanding.
Were you using the wrong pronouns?
Did I?
You did. I think you're going to be cancelled now after this.
It's difficult, but I mean, it ties into what I'm about to say. Really, is that understanding the facts of biological reality and the difference between the sexes from a genetic and biological perspective, in no way, in my mind, logically leads to any form of discrimination against trans people. I'm not, if I've spent time with trans people, I've worked with trans people, I've spoke at conferences with trans people, and you just, they introduce themselves, you accept them, say, you speak to them as individuals. That's how I engage with everybody in my life. There's no reason why they should be shunned, abused, harassed, not have access to any sort of rights that I have access to. That's out of the question to me. But none of that entails me pretending certain things aren't true. I mean, I liken it's not a perfect analogy here. I understand, and there's a million ways you could say it's not perfect, but it's sort of like the idea to me that religious people believe they have a soul. I'm happy for them to believe that. I'm happy for them to live their life as if that's true. I just don't want the entire of our society and institutions and scientific understanding reorganized to incorporate that belief. That's all I'm saying. You do you, but there are still some truths we can point to.
That's the other issue as well. If you're going to pretend sex doesn't matter, where the fuck does that leave us with medicine and science? Because if certain health problems are going to be worse for you depending on whether you're a man or a woman.
Yeah.
How do you then treat people if you're going to say, oh, well, men and women are all, there's just no such thing as sex, we're all equal. Certain things are going to affect you more as a woman. I
wonder now as well, because you'll see some news article go around like woman, slashes friend's face, or, woman abuses kid, these articles that go, and you go into them, it's actually it's a trans woman, it's a biological male, but all them crimes are being lumped in with the female crime statistics.
So that's going to skew the statistics now.
And a lot of, male specific health issues, like I think we're more prone to die of obviously colon cancer, more likely to die of heart disease, all these things. I think we're going to see a rapid increase of certain morbidities in the women's category as this rages on.
Men are also really dangerous and reckless as well, and stupid. So that's why you also die young. Sorry.
Well, there's actually a little something to that.
There is.
Which almost kind of is an advantage for a man and also a drawback. I mean, there's a reason why when you hear about some guy leaping to his death from a balcony in Ibiza, it's never a woman. He's trying to jump to the next door balcony, or he's trying to do something stupid to show off. You very rarely see a woman die from misadventure, do you? But I think this.
Well, but that's also because we think, being found splattered on the pavement, it's just going to be very ugly to look at.
But it's also
it's probably easier, it's more dignified to die taking loads of sleeping pills, because then you've got time to do your hair and makeup. Whereas if you shot yourself in the head, then there's going to be blood and brains everywhere. It's just not an attractive look, is it? You want to look good for your funeral, because when people are looking at the casket, they want to be like, oh, she was a beauty. Can't really do that if you blow your brains out.
That is an issue for sure. I think
These are things I think about when it comes to my time to die, you know.
Yeah, I think the general rule is, in terms of the differences, and obviously there are exceptions, and I know a lot of exceptions.
Yeah. There's always going to be an exception to the rule, but the point is certain rules are there for a reason.
One of them is that men generally are more inclined to take risks, and this has both the benefit of higher achievement, the greater the risk, the potential for the greater reward, but it also has the potential to, fall face first from a balcony in Ibiza. So there is that balance. I think this is one of the reasons you find men are more involved in car accidents as well. They'll pull out early, less hesitant, but obviously force mistakes in that way. These are a lot of things that women are better at than men. Yeah. I just can't fucking think of any right now.
How about everything? But anyway, the point remains that we shouldn't be scared of saying what's factually true. Men and women are different, and we have two sexes for a reason. Okay, and we don't have to say one sex is better than the other, even though we know it's women. But we can acknowledge the differences and celebrate those differences. And, there's going to be disadvantages to both as well, because not everyone is perfect.
Yeah, but different but equal. That's what we should be aiming for. But again...
Equal under the eyes of the law, yes. But you should acknowledge that we are different. Men and women are different. Why is that controversial? And that's why I said earlier, this whole thing, it has an Emperor's New Clothes vibe about it. Everybody can see what's happening. Everyone can see what's going on, but we just can't say it because we're going to be labelled as bigots. And like you said, with the whole pronouns issue, if someone identifies, say, as a woman or identifies as a man, and genuinely so, and it's not some weirdo, then fine, I will happen. No, I mean, how you get those big people who dress up and decide, they're just going to walk into a woman's
There is an
changing room
overlap
'cause they have a
between
fetish.
genuine transgenderism and the fetishization of being a woman, for sure. That's definitely a phenomenon. That's not just me going,
I know
pots and
there
frocks. There is. I've done a lot of reading on this.
Yeah, so you see, so that's the point that I was alluding to. But if you're genuinely someone who, you have transitioned, you've taken, say, the hormones, maybe you've even had the surgery as well, and you want to be recognised for the gender that you are now, I don't have an issue with that. I think people should be treated with dignity and respect. I'm not going to shout in somebody's face, say, you were born male, you're not a woman, la 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 la. People deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. And, if you are now a she instead of he, fine, I'll call you that. But I'm sorry, you are still biologically a male, or you are biologically still a female if you are a trans man. There's just no way of getting around that.
It's worth pointing out as well. So the first thing is, whenever I see somebody talking absolute lunacy on this issue, it's very rarely a trans person, to be honest. It's somebody who's taken up the mantle of trans activism on behalf of trans people. We see a lot of that in activism, strangely. The anti-racist, you look at the BLM marches in London, it's very white, very middle class, right? So first of all, it's mostly not trans people talking nonsense about this. It's well worth pointing out. Whenever I mock someone for pronouns in the bio, because, the correlation between batshit far left politics and having your pronouns in your bio is very high. I've got the research, right? Whenever I point this out, it's very rarely a trans person. I don't think it ever has been, to be honest. I'll for sure, I'm not sure, but I don't think it has. Second point I want to make is we are filtering this entire topic through a default, which is the far left progressive view on it. So there's lots of trans people out there who say, I was biologically male. Yeah, I was biologically woman. Why would I deny that? That's true. That's a fact. But this is how I live my life now. And I don't want these lunatics talking on my behalf. There are a lot of fairly conservative trans people. We seem to accept that anyone that's a minority must automatically subscribe to all the far left dogmas, and it's just not true. There is no diversity of thought, and every time someone says diversity of thought now, that's such a good point that it's become a right-wing dog whistle, apparently. Have you noticed whenever you mention a fair and accurate point now, it's now dismissed as a right-wing talking point or a racist dog whistle? It's not actually racist or right-wing. It's the hidden meaning within it. You're trying to, somehow signal your tribe. And it's such a tawdry way of arguing the point.
It's so weird how it's now the right that seem to be championing free speech and diversity of thought, when it should have been something that the left or the liberal left were supposed to be champions of. No, but that you are right about the diversity of thought, and it shouldn't be the right that is championing this, because historically it really hasn't. It's sort of flipped on its head, this whole thing. And speaking of diversity of thought, there's a Debbie Heaton, who's a trans woman, was born a man and then
I've seen some of her writing.
Yeah, she's been very, very sensible on this. She said, obviously I'm all for transgender rights, etc., but, I am still biologically male, and a trans woman is still biologically male and will have certain advantages over a woman. That's just factually true. So you do have people from within those communities who are speaking out. And it just seems to be a minority of loudmouths. Like we've seen in Batley in Birmingham, it seems to be a minority who are very, very sort of extreme and polarizing views, who are given way too much airtime, and we're capitulating to their bizarre demands when, the vast majority of people don't even think that way. There's some really bizarre, you have to listen to the Moral Maze episode on this, because there was a trans woman who obviously is in favor of Laurel Hubbard competing, and was saying, but nobody says anything about gay women competing with straight women. And he's like, yeah, but that's because they're fucking biologically the same. How are you even making such a stupid
Who was it
point?
on Jeremy Vine's show? He was just like, women are just going to have to try harder. Sorry. It's like shit. I was like, I couldn't believe it. And this is really interesting for someone like me. I get involved in this row on principle, because for me, it's transgressing all the things I care about. It's got a religious flavour to it. It's got its own blasphemies. It's so fucking hostile to freedom of thought, freedom of expression, all the things I hate. This, sort of the contents of it fits that. However, it's not me that's getting the thin end of the wedge from it. It's women, obviously. So that I've got no skin in the game, as it were. But still, every time I look up, some woman is getting absolutely shafted by this debate. So I think we can confidently say now, you biological women can join us straight white men at the bottom of the intersectional hierarchy. Your day in the sun's over. You are one rung above us scum now.
Oh, whatever. Check your white privilege.
Shit, you'll always have that, won't you?
But the whole point of this debate is, it's quite scary, because it seems to be that, women have fought for centuries for their own spaces because they were excluded by men, and now they're having those hard-won spaces being taken away from them by men.
Yeah.
Because it's not men's spaces that are being taken away at all. Men are absolutely fine. It's women who are suffering.
And it's probably men that are making the bulk of these decisions, which a lot of people are slowly starting to cotton onto, which is interesting. But I mean, I've been reading a lot on this. I mean, there's a lot of books that I have read, I've got to read, I've worked through, and when I'm reading them on this issue, it feels very much like it felt when I was reading Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris or Christopher Hitchens, when they deconstructed these illogical systems and shown how divisive they were and how dangerous they were, if they could be if they got out of hand. I feel very much like this is the sort of new atheism moment in terms of the people that are writing these books. That's how I feel about it, and I don't know where it's going to lead. It's going to probably get a lot worse before it gets better, but I think a lot more people are cottoning on to what's going on here, and they're not bad people. They don't want to oppress anyone. They don't want to abuse trans people. They don't want to harass them. They just, want to protect women's spaces, protect women's rights.
But I think, speaking of, from one male parts and lady parts, have you seen We Are Lady Parts on Channel 4?
I have
See
not.
what I did there?
I think it sounds like something I'd find on Pornhub. That's my first impression. You did recommend it to me, and I have added it to my list, but I have not watched it, which will make for an interesting review from you because I can ask questions. What is it? I mean, it's a sitcom, isn't it?
It is. It's I think it was 6 or 8 episodes on Channel 4. It's on 4OD now, and I'm sure there are ways that people in America can watch it as well. So it's about an all-female Muslim punk band. Try and get your head around that. You don't like punk. You don't like Muslim women. So they're looking for a lead guitarist, and they find one in the guise of Amina, who's, she's this sort of like Bridget Jones in a headscarf type figure. She's going on all these dates with Muslim men to find a husband, even though her mum's saying, why are you that desperate to get married? Hint, hint, mum. She's battling against a more traditional world and her conservative friends versus, this punk band, which is allowing her to express herself. And I just thought it was a really good TV program because it didn't have any stereotypes of Muslims, just showed people being regular human beings, having fun, having the same life problems that everyone else does. My only issue was that most of them were wearing headscarves.
Right, the authentic aesthetic for TV Muslims in the UK, unfortunately.
It is. That doesn't seem very punk to me, because punk is supposed to be about sticking 2 fingers up to the man, authorities, and not conforming, whereas a headscarf means you're
when
kind
I saw
of
all the
doing
feminists,
that.
the non-Muslim feminists adopting the headscarf thinking they were radicals, I was like, I cannot think of anything more vanilla conformist than wearing a modesty garment, but you do you.
Exactly. But it was a good show. I would recommend it because it is quite funny, and if you're looking for some light-hearted entertainment, I would say have a go.
I'm still gutted that we never got a full series order of The Brides of Isis. Can you remember that little sitcom piece we had a while back? I sound like I'm being facetious, but I think it would have been the real. So it's called The Real Housewives of Isis, should I say? It was a kind of riff on the Real Housewives of whatever. Did you not see that? There was a massive scandal about it. There was like.
Is this a Sky documentary?
No.
Or is this something else?
This was part of a sitcom that went out on the BBC ages ago. It was like a little sketch as part of a wider collection of sketches, but this one was focused on jihadi brides in Syria, and it was filmed and the conceit was it was like the Real Housewives of what's the real show called? It's escaped my memory because I've never watched it.
Housewives of Cheshire.
Oh, whatever, yeah. And it was basically showing these jihadi brides behaving that way, sewing suicide vests and being bitchy and catty to each other. It was really funny, and it was kind of making a mockery of this situation. And loads of really conservative Muslims complained that it was taking the piss out of Islam.
Yeah, but it's taking the piss out of ISIS.
Yes.
Are you saying ISIS is Islamic? So doesn't that contradict what you've all been saying? I wish I had watched it now, because it was this sort of like Four Lions-esque.
Yes, exactly that.
Taking the piss out of all these people.
I blogged about it in 2017. That's how old it is. So that's probably why you don't remember. The clip's been removed, but it's just lots of people, all the news articles were like, it's controversial, it's Islamophobic, it's insensitive. So, I made the point that, this sketch solely and completely mocked ISIS. That was its target, that was its focus, yet a lot of Muslims were getting offended that it was mocking Islam. And I was kind of saying, well, you can't tell us that ISIS has got absolutely nothing to do with Islam, and then when we mock ISIS, you say it's Islamophobic. It's a bit of a mixed message there that you might want to reconsider.
Oh dear. Well, speaking of ISIS...
Best segue ever! well, we're on the topic of the Islamic State.
Speaking of lady parts, speaking of ISIS, Spaghetti Bagram has appeared in a documentary.
Yeah.
The Return of ISIS. I've not seen it, although I have heard of it. So basically Sky's done a documentary filming all these women and girls who went off to join ISIS, and of course Shamima Begum, the East London school girl who ran away at 15 to join ISIS, was features in them. And there are some other women in there from Canada, Netherlands, US,
Germany.
etc. They're in limbo because their governments don't want anything to do with them, and apparently they spoke of being brainwashed and being unhappy, etc., etc. Have you seen it?
So I watched the first half of it, and I've been taking notes. I did have some sort of plan to blog about it, and I just got angry at it.
So what were your first impressions then? Because it might be once you finish, we can have another.
That's what I'm going to say. So review. I mean, it's very important to mention I've seen half of it. So the second half, I was very disappointed with things they didn't do. Now, bear in mind, I've only seen half.
So
of it.
What did they do? And what did they not do, which you hope they will raise in the
Yes,
second?
So I've seen half of it, so I might be absolutely, completely wrong, but I've heard from other people that I'm not. But I will intend to finish it. I may blog about it. However, it was sort of presented. They weren't presented as some people who made that decision and left. They were sort of portrayed as captives, clueless people who went there. There were scenes showing them frolicking and having fun, and part of these workshops, and it was like therapy sessions. It was almost like you were watching a group of alcoholics going through AA presentations rather than a bunch of people who had joined a murdering, raping, genocidal death cult. And I just didn't feel there was enough emphasis on the people making it, because they had access to all these people. They had them to sit down, to question them, to answer questions. And they didn't ask them pertinent questions about, how do you feel about what the Islamic State has done, what they're doing now. There was nothing in there that gave you any indication that they felt bad about what they had done, or had changed their mind, or had a different perspective on Islam. And just seeing them, I remember one of my notes. What have I put? I've just got my notes up now.
It's notes full of saying fuck.
It's funny because
twat, fuck.
What did I put?
Liar.
Right. So I put one of my notes is
angry,
laughing and giggling in Wellington boots as though they are on a summer camp. The Canadian jokes as they try and plug a flood. This is not exactly German engineering, yeah? Haha, to the German jihadi bride. And I was like...
Oh, how cringe.
I put it, it's obvious there would be some level of camaraderie and kinship among the Western jihadi brides. It's just that I don't want to fucking see it, thank you. That's my note. I put
ridiculous.
I put it wouldn't be out of place if this entire sequence had Girls Just Want to Have Fun by Cyndi Lauper playing in the background. And they just, these. I get that this topic and these people are perfectly valid subjects for documentaries of this kind. Why wouldn't it be? Of course, it felt like a PR piece for them. And bear in mind, I've only seen half of it.
I don't like the fact that now Shamima Begum's team are trying to push this narrative that she was a victim of trafficking.
Yes. So bear in mind, I've watched half of this documentary and my notes are 995 words.
Those are some notes.
And they're all angry. And I've got another half to watch, and I was going to get a blog out. I don't know if this will happen yet, but we'll see. But I mean, yeah, I put a note. What's my other note as well? Zero acknowledgement or accountability. They talk like they're recovering adults in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. They write letters to their former selves. They are treated not as though they are criminals, that they have joined a group wishing to exterminate their fellow citizens. The self-help classes are like they are trying to quit the bottle or overcome a porn addiction. They play trust games, smiles and blindfolds as though at a corporate workshop.
Pass me the sick bucket.
Yeah. I'm glad that I took these notes now, because I completely forgot how annoyed I was.
I mean, I might want to watch it on a day where I feel I just want to get enraged about something. Oh, let me watch Jihadi Brides on Sky. Oh, fucking hell. I'm really sick of people trying to excuse them. And there's an element of sexism here, because nobody would make a program about male jihadis who went over and trying to get us to feel sorry for them. But because they're women, and because women are obviously the more meeker, submissive sex, that means, we can't, we have absolutely no agency of our lives. We can't take responsibility for anything because all these evil men have made us do things. So, not my fault, sols. Nobody would excuse the boys and the men who have gone over to fight, and yet because they're women we have to feel a bit sorry for them because they also had children, some of them. Well, I don't give a fuck if you had children. It was your decision to have children in a war zone, and I'm sorry that your children have died, Shamima, because that's hard for anyone to cope with, but it's your own fault that they're dead. It's not our fault that your children died. That's on you.
There's a very interesting moment in the documentary where Shamima Begum's actually handed the letter from the Home Office to say that her citizenship will be stripped from her. They get that on camera, and I've written a quote down that shows. She says, "They see the crimes that ISIS committed, and they feel like I'm responsible for those crimes because I came, and they just think that I knew about these crimes and supported these crimes, but that's not true. I would never support something like this, like the things they did." However, in previous interviews, she's spoken about being in favour of the Manchester bombing, being fine with decapitated heads because it was all Islamic. So she's lying, and she accuses the government of just wanting to make her look bad.
You make yourself look bad, Shamima. You make yourself look bad, and you do look bad. And somebody once described her as attractive, and I thought, really? You look like a chav.
After that comment of her saying it's the government trying to make her look bad, I've just put the words "fucking hell" just to give you an idea of what frame of mind I was in watching this.
No, Shamima, you make yourself look bad because you are. Because you're a twat.
So
I get it. Maybe she was 15 when she went, and we've just been talking about child marriage and whether you're responsible at that age to do anything. But at the end of the day, we also heard when she went there, she was supposed to be part of that group of enforcing strict Sharia laws on other women. They used to beat women for not, say, covering up properly. And she used to apparently sew the suicide vests onto fighters. I don't know if that's true, but that's what reports have suggested. And if that's true, then you weren't just a bystander, Shamima. You are a criminal.
Just looking at my notes now, two more things really stood out to me. Well, the first thing was Shamima Begum, almost in tears, talking about how hard it was on her to learn that her friends had died. And I'm kind of thinking, okay, you've experienced loss that now, haven't you? Now extrapolate that to the thousands upon thousands of people murdered by the organisation you've joined, and how the Kurds feel and how their families feel and how the Yazidis feel. There's a horrible sequence in the documentary which shows the jihadis separating the Yazidi women from their parents and guardians into one side, and it's just horrific. There's a really, really heartbreaking sequence, actually. There's a couple of I'd say 3 to 4 year old boys, maybe a bit younger. I'm not so great with kid ages, but they're playing in the camp, and one of them is quite clearly mimicking to his friend language he's heard from an adult. And he's saying, like, if you are a jihadi, he's telling his friend this. He's saying, if you are a jihadi, no one can harm you. You are your own boss. And he keeps saying, you understand? You understand? Get this into your head. Get this into your head. And he's clearly mimicking an adult. And he's like, after you die, if you're a jihadi, you go straight to paradise. Get this into your head. Listen to me. And it's this little 3-year-old kid saying this to another kid. And it's
where's he picked that up from?
He's clearly mimicking
he's not
an
picked
adult.
that up from just anywhere.
Yeah, but it's the whole domineering. Listen to me. Get this in your head. He's just parroting what he's heard from an adult, and that's tragic to me. How these kids who could have the most fulfilled life ahead of them are now in a Syrian camp because of some bad decisions and ideology from adults. That's the most tragic thing for me.
That is really sad. I do feel sorry for the children in all of this. And if they're saying that, they've heard it from somebody. Yeah. And they're hearing it, they're probably still hearing it, which makes me think that these people are not rehabilitated. They have not changed. People rarely change. They rarely change.
Unless you're Laurel Hubbard.
Yes.
Yes. On that note, did you say we got some Twitter questions?
We do have some Twitter questions. Yay. Daz Exton, or Depixton, has said, what are your thoughts on Stop Funding Hate attempting to smear the news channel GB News as far right before it airs, and companies such as IKEA UK pulling their adverts from the news channel due to pressure from the social media mob? That's a really good question.
Great question, Daz.
I don't know if you've... it was an okay question, Daz. Jeez. Anyway.
Yeah,
he's going to stop listening. Sorry, I don't want to lose all 3 of our fans. Right? It was a good question, Daz. Right. I don't know about
Fuck you,
but
Daz.
I definitely...
Sorry, I was in the moment. I didn't mean that. That was completely unnecessary. It's hot in this attic.
I've tuned into GB News, and visually it is really shite.
It's an eyesore, isn't it?
It is. It just looks like something from the 80s,
But that's mine.
doesn't it?
It's been plagued with technical issues. The sound, the picture quality, the graphics are atrocious. There's a lot of my people that I know and interviewed. Obviously, my friend Andrew Doyle's on there. I'm very pleased to see him getting that sort of platform because I think he's a massively important voice on this sort of woke culture war and for freedom of expression, and just he's a funny, nice chap in general. But it's been plagued with technical issues, graphical eyesores. But these are things that can be fixed as it progresses.
Yes,
obviously, I don't.
Yeah, because it's a new channel. Yeah, it's still a baby.
That doesn't bother me so much. I mean, it's apparent that many of the people who are front of camera are not camera trained. They've not got that BBC era professionalism, but they'll figure it out as they go along. And I think that's a good thing to switch it up a little bit. Get different kind of voices. They just not have the standard po-faced BBC newscaster. So we'll see where it goes. I think the bigger issue that Daz has raised as well is the whole stop funding hate attempt to get advertisers to pull out before the show's even launched. This has continued long after launch. Yeah. The IKEA one's quite funny actually because IKEA agreed to remove their advertisements from GB News on the strength of like one tweet I saw. And
it's ridiculous. It's all based on tweets.
But the funny thing is this one tweet only accused GB News of being right-wing. They didn't say extremist or far-right. They said right-wing. So that was enough for IKEA to go, we'll pull out our advertising. So I'm kind of thinking, are you going to...
all this based on one fucking tweet?
But are they now to say that actually... See, this is where we've got and how dumbed down the political discussion has become, that right-wing has just come to mean evil. Just right-wing, not far-right, not extremist, but right-wing has just come to mean evil, which is ridiculous. I'd like to know how many right-wing people shop at IKEA and whether or not IKEA thinks they're welcome anymore. They'll be happy to take all the money.
Yeah. Oh, but they had to reverse their decision, as did all the other companies. There's that beer or cider company. Is it Copperberg or something?
Oh, yeah. Oh, they reversed it. I never saw the reverse.
All of these companies, they had to reverse their decision because, they made a rash decision based on tweets. Because Twitter now sets the agenda. A few people make stupid comments on Twitter now, and you have to take them seriously. And these companies realise... They do. And this is the same thing that happened with Deval as well. They realised that cancelling her was done very hastily as well. And a few days later...
Sorry, it's just to clear. She was the artist who the Royal Academy banned her art from their gift shop for saying that human beings can't change sex, I think is what she said. And they publicly labelled her comments as transphobic as well. So they've accused her of bigotry and yeeted her from the gift shop, apparently. Yeah,
and then they had to reverse that decision because they realised it was stupid and they made it, they made a hasty decision. And then they had to issue an apology. And it was a really shit apology as well because they tweeted it and a link to the apology. And the link wasn't even to the apology. You had to scroll down and click on something else to find it. But this is what happens with all these companies. They're just making stupid decisions based on a few social media posts and realizing, oh, actually, what the hell are we doing? I'm
very cynical about this. I don't think they're apologizing or reversing because they've realized they've made a mistake. They'll capitulate to the tweets thinking, well, this is representative of the nation as a whole, and they'll get even more of a backlash from that now because people have had enough of it and they'll think, oh shit, we've completely misjudged this situation, let's do what these other people want. It's just very cynical. It's a business. They don't care about human rights or politics. They just don't want any hassle. And I tweeted out the other day in response to all this, I just put, dear corporations, let me provide you with some advice pro bono. Adopt a we do not make decisions based on social media outrage policy. It'll really annoy the outraged, of course, but within 48 hours, they will get bored and find a new target, and you can go back to selling stuff.
Yeah, and also what happens with these adverts, these companies, as I've learned, they don't advertise directly. They hire a company and say to them, we want this number of adverts put out, and the company will say, right, I can get you X number of adverts placed across a variety of platforms for this much money.
Yeah, with this
blah,
potential
blah, blah.
reach. It's basic PR.
With this potential reach, yeah. So they don't. Yeah, so these companies don't know where their adverts are going in the first place. And so, they get a bit wishy-washy about it. Say, oh, well, we didn't know where our adverts were going. We're going to look into this. And these same, like IKEA, was it IKEA or another company that have stores in Saudi Arabia or something? And you think, so hang on a minute, GB News is evil, but Saudi Arabia is okay. If you're gonna,
I think so.
if you're gonna apply these standards,
this might not be true. But I saw somebody say it on the internet, so it probably is true on that strength alone. But somebody had made the suggestion. It might be a joke. It might be true, but they suggested that the IKEA catalogue in Saudi Arabia has the women removed from it.
Oh my God, I wouldn't be surprised if that's true.
That's one of them things, like, I almost don't want to know if it's true because that's so funny as a joke anyway. I mean, it does, whether or not it's true, it
sounds like a joke.
Yeah, it kind of encompasses the sort of corporate hypocrisy on these issues. That's why you get pride flags on all the corporate arms in the Western world, but suddenly, strangely, the Middle East division doesn't put the pride flag out, or the Turkish or the Russian, anywhere where gay rights or gay people are oppressed, they don't want to fly the pride flag on their corporate.
No, they don't.
They don't want to be unpopular. They want to sell shit, which is what such. But that's fine. That's your job. Just tell us that's what you're doing.
You're a company. Your job is to just fucking sell beds and cupboards, right? Stop trying to act like moral
guardians. I don't need Ben and Jerry's to tell me what a cunt I am. Do you know what I mean? Get back to torturing cows.
I can do that for free.
Yeah, this is why we have you on. So yeah, thanks, Daz. Great question about GB News. We'll see how it goes. To be honest, competition in that arena is always a good thing. Okay, I've got a question here from Jan Skelton. Jan's lovely. I've met Jan a few times. She's asked, should male people, however they identify, be allowed to compete in female sports? Do you think our euphemistic language around this topic, although well-intended, may be contributing to genuine confusion about the reality and immutability of sex and the need for single-sex spaces? That's an amazing question.
Yes.
That sort of contains all the issues. And I think...
So basically, no and yes,
No,
Jan.
yes. But I think we've ticked that off along the podcast. I think she's preempted what we'd be annoyed about this week.
The first power, so many questions, but I want to focus on Matt Hancock.
Oh.
So, I don't know if you are aware of this, unless you were in a cave, Stephen. But Matt Hancock, who's our health secretary, was caught on camera in a steamy clinch with a woman.
Have you seen the video now? They've released the video.
Wife. I really don't want to watch it because Matt Hancock is gross, first of all. And the idea of him having sex and stuff just makes me queasy. So basically, the Sun newspaper published pictures of him kissing an aide. This is Gina
somebody he's hired to do a job with government money. She's only earning something like 15 grand a year, but that relates to something like 15 to 20 days of work a year. So I think it's quite a good hourly rate, I would say.
Yeah. So Matt Hancock throughout the pandemic. That's true. Matt Hancock throughout the pandemic has been on and on at us to follow the rules, and we must not stop following social distancing no matter what, because the pandemic threat is still real, and don't even think about hugging your family or relatives until it's legally obliged to do so. And then we see him groping a woman, proper getting his tongue right in her mouth, which isn't social distancing.
Bit of a squeeze of the buttocks as well.
Oh,
he's obviously got some moves. Matt Hancock on the dance floor, coming at your sister.
He's got like proper dad dance moves.
Well, he has 3 kids and a wife offensive as well, which complicates this issue. She's married as well. So I've
seen some people suggesting, it's not the adultery that really annoys me. And you think, how have we got to a point where we don't care that somebody is publicly cheating on
to be honest,
his wife?
I'm right. So I'm against.
I am judging. I am. I'm sorry, but if somebody is a serial cheater and a liar, if they're cheating on their wife and lying, that does say a lot about their character. I
agree.
I think.
But
I mean,
I still think
who knows what could be going on in their personal.
Yeah, well,
life.
I still think it falls
Fine.
I think that still falls into the realm of personal life. I'm against.
It's not personal. It's not personal because it affected his work. He was doing it at work.
It maybe improved his work, Hiram. Have you considered that?
It fucking hasn't. I don't know where you've been, but it hasn't improved his work. He's been lecturing us all throughout this pandemic, to follow the rules, to make huge sacrifices. Don't even think about stretching COVID rules. Flexing of rules could be fatal. That's what he said. He warned people, hilariously, to be sensible when having sex during lockdown. He was warning against casual sex. He was telling off young people, saying they were behind a COVID spike. And then when Professor Lockdown himself, Neil Ferguson, was found to have broken the rules to meet his married lover, he was saying, I think he should resign. This is a matter for the police now. So I don't think this is a personal matter. This is very much a public matter. This is a man who has made illegal basic human contact. A lot of people haven't been able to meet their lovers or their partners because they're in different parts of the country, because Matt Hancock and the government have made that wrong. They've encroached on our rights to do so, and then they go around breaking the rules themselves. It is one rule for them and one rule for us. They all must be breaking the rules.
Yeah.
I bet they are.
I'm more or less with you 100%. Apart from the adultery thing, I care more about the rule breaking, and I don't really care about the adultery. I think that's a personal matter. I think that's something for him, his wife, and his extramarital lovers to sort out between them. Nothing illegal's happened as far as I can see. But the social distancing thing, that is the thing, isn't it? So, I mean, these two questions I have really about this entire thing. And the first one is, what the hell does Matt Hancock know about the government to make him invincible, that he can't be fired for this sort of shit? The second question is, who's leaking video footage from inside government buildings to the press?
Disgruntled employees, some security guard who Matt Hancock probably pissed off, and they thought, right, but I think it's a disgruntled employee.
Right.
Really.
So, I mean, we have the health secretary there, the guy who's told us all to stay indoors, don't touch anyone, don't go out. And not only told us that, there's people who've been fined who have got into legal trouble for flouting them rules. And he's touching up his aide on work time, on who's being paid with our money. It really does. So, I mean, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment, because if he was to be fired for that or resign, I'd say, fine, that's fair. That seems like a perfectly reasonable response to this situation. Is there an argument to be said, however, that a slap on the wrist might be more appropriate given the situation we're currently in and how important he is to that situation? Keeping in mind, he's not killed anyone. He's not... I know that's a low benchmark for being fired with my employment tribunal. I only got them to the point of death and then resuscitated them. So is there an argument to be said that maybe let him get us through this pandemic and then he can be stepped down or given his marching orders?
No, I think he should.
You hate Matt Hancock.
I can't stand it. He really has put the cock in Hancock.
He's put the cock in his aide. That's the biggest problem.
Oh, but we don't know that.
We don't know
sure.
Allegedly, perhaps.
He put his tongue down her throat. We know that. Maybe he was doing a COVID test. Oh God, I feel sick.
There's a joke
for
about being double
that.
jabbed in there somewhere, which I'm going to leave.
Oh, there were so many disgusting jokes out there, like memes.
Yeah, I was going to say, just for the memes alone, I think this was a worthy thing to have done. But it's nice to have a bit of Tory sleaze, isn't it? Something a bit normal for a change.
I know we missed it. The 90s was all about it. Now the 90s are coming back, and that
it's
even
almost
means
comforting
Tory
for me.
sleaze.
Finding that a Tory's shagging around, or he's got a rent boy, or there's something untoward.
90s fashion has come back, like the crop tops and the high-waisted mom jeans and the dad trainers, and now we've got Tory sleeves.
Sleeves. Oh, all is right in the world. Nature is healing.
And on that note, I think we're done.
All right. It's been a pleasure, Aram. Thank you for listening to the Godless Spellchecker podcast. The podcast is a one-man operation, produced in my spare time away from my day job, and I love making it for you. If you enjoy what you hear, please consider lending some support. The show is entirely listener-supported. I don't sell anything, I don't run ads, and given the alternative and unpopular focus of my content, it's very unlikely to find a sponsor. So there are a number of ways you can support and chip in and help improve the show and give me more time to produce more content. You can become a patron supporter and pledge a monetary amount per month or per episode by visiting patreon.com/gspellchecker. If you can't lend monetary support right now, don't worry, there's other ways you can help the podcast too. You can share it on your various social media networks, or take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen to it. Your support is massively appreciated. Thank you. Think we've all learned something here today?